Well, there is certainly a lot going on in TSM as an org, and this is obviously going to affect the LCS team, and I think it's time that we talk about it. So let's talk some TSM. Welcome back, everybody. And yeah, there are things we've got to talk about with the TSM LCS team and TSM as a whole. This one's going to go a little bit more into the nuances of kind of where esports are as a whole right now. So if that's not really your shtick, then maybe about halfway through this, you could probably be done watching. To be honest with you, but I think that there are some really important things that we need to discuss when looking at the LCS team. Now, we will actually look at the team and some of the things that have been happening in the LCS as a whole here later. But this is all very relevant things. I've been thinking about it all weekend, and I wanted to make sure that the Monday video was going to be us talking about the business and everything that's changing right now for TSM and esports as a whole. So let's start here with Glenn. If you didn't know that Glenn has been our general manager for the LCS team. He was doing a pretty good job, I think, with the pieces that he had available to him. And here's what he said. Today is my last day at TSM, and I am grateful for the amazing and unforgettable time that I've had with my teams. The memories and experiences of my time working at NA will stay with me forever. Throughout this split, I've witnessed the entire team giving 120% effort in, everything, basically. What's important is that top part here. It sounds to me like he is leaving NA. He has come over from the PCS, and we'll have to see if he goes to Europe or China or back to the PCS. Maybe he finds a job and stays here, but this sort of language doesn't make it seem like that. What's interesting is he was tweeting about the team, maybe like a day before this announcement. And so, I was sitting there and I was like, man, they've already got just Chawi. This is going to make it really tough. And now Glenn's gone. So Chawi is kind of like a one-man show, which we'll talk about. But then they also have Christine Huang, who has been I guess kind of like the manager for both teams in a sense, like helping the players get what they need. And I guess kind of technically the coach or something like that of the academy team, even though they didn't really need one. I mean, they have a bunch of veterans on it, so I guess they've been kind of relying on them to do certain things. But she states, today's my last day at TSM. I cherish all the valuable experience that I've gained here. Really appreciate every manager's, players, coaches, staff, and college colleagues, Jeezel, that I've worked with in the past 1 year. Again, just minimizing the staff, right? And so everybody is wondering what is going on? Why are TSM just letting go of these people when the staff is already, was just the three of them to my knowledge, and now it is down to just Chawi. And I guess we'll we'll go to this Reddit post here by Welligan. Shout out. So Chawi is it now, right? He's like the sole member of staff remaining. God bless him. He's now coach for both teams, GM, manager, psychologist, and everything else. Whatever paltry amount they're probably paying him is not enough. And I read this and I was like, man, I can't really disagree with that. What is going on, right? What are TSM doing right now? We've been waiting since November or whatever, right, for the announcement that's gonna bring us back to Worlds and all this other stuff, right? It was supposed to be in January. Didn't happen in January. It was supposed to happen in March. Now it's not happening in March. This is from LCS Eevee. Found it on Reddit. I think somebody sent it to him. This is from Regi himself. yeah, he's back at it, giving us promises, I guess, of things that may or may not happen. Um, we overhired and expanded too quickly. With the economic downturn, we made the necessary changes to be sustainable. This was not easy. Our current team is stronger and more performant. We don't see negative effects with the changes that we've made. TSM was not heading in the right direction, and I'm taking a more hands-on role. In fact, we've put the right decision makers in place to be more successful long term. Then he starts with this update, or I guess ends with this. We're in the process of figuring multiple things out and will not be able to make any sort of announcement until everything is final and complete. Expect a minimum of 4 to 5 months. I'll make a post later on why we decided to invest less into the LCS this season. There's a lot to unpack here. A lot. And like I said, I mean, this is about halfway through. So if you guys don't want, my thoughts on this at this point, you could skip to the Wednesday episode, I guess, whenever it comes out. I mean, it'll be coming out on Wednesday, but whenever you're watching it, I guess. Let's just go line by line here. I'm going to give you my thoughts on what he's saying, because there are some very, people are going to hate this, but really good things that he is saying and doing, okay? For starters, we overhired and expanded too quickly. TSM was making a very concerted effort to try to get out east, right? They were bringing on, new teams, a lot of players, right? They did expand very, very quickly. But this is not just a TSM thing. This is every esport team, organization, whatever you want to refer to them as, literally on the planet right now. Basically, I would say at least 3 out of 4 teams or orgs overhired and expanded too quickly. This is the mindset that they had, was that if we take all of this investor money, right, then we can continue to increase the valuation, meaning how much the company would be worth if you sold 100% of it, right? So, I'm pretty sure TSM is worth like $200 million or something like that. I have to go back and look. There's a Forbes article on it. But they're one of the most valuable orgs in all of esports. Okay, they're worth as much as some NHL, MLS franchises, sports franchises here in the in North America, in at least the United States. Okay, and what the goal is, especially before all of COVID and the current recession that the world is going through, or at least the United States, but I'm pretty sure it's the world as well. They were just taking as much money as they could get and then trying to increase the value of the company by getting more teams, getting more players, winning more, creating more opportunities, not necessarily a reality, but at least opportunities to make more money. This is what every org did. I think TSM generally did a better job of it, but because Reggie wanted to keep more control of the team, I think at least full control technically by owning more than 51% of the company, right? Because what you do is when you take an investment, you sell part of your ownership stake in the company, right? So if the company's worth, we'll say $100 million, right? If Reggie owns 51% of that, right? If they were to sell all of TSM to somebody, he would get $51 million of that. There are other portions and things that have to be parsed out through that, but just for basic math and basic explanation, that's what would happen, okay? And the thing is that, all of these orgs just figure that they could keep raising money, right? They could keep taking in as much money as they want, and it didn't matter whether or not, at least not at this point in their mind, whether or not they were profitable, meaning that they were actually making money on all the investments that they were putting in there. Now, there's econ classes and business management classes that would probably explain this better. For those who don't know, I teach at Miami University. This is one of the things that I at least give base levels of explanation about. And, there's just so much to unpack here. But the reality is TSM not as much as everybody else, but they took money from outside investors, from the Steph Currys, right? From I forget who else was like the big ones, like the big actors and stuff that they were able to get technically through, I think, funds that everybody else was doing. But they were able to take in all this money, right? And then the goal was through advertising, through partnerships, through winning, that the organization would make more money, right? And eventually would get to a point where their costs, how much they're paying everybody, how much they're paying for all their stuff, right, would at least even out with the amount of money that they were bringing in. The problem is with the economic downturn, right? He talks about, we made the necessary changes to be sustainable. This was not easy. Sustainability means that they're going to try to survive, right? They are going to try to make sure that that amount that they are outputting is the same as the amount that they are inputting, the amount that they are bringing in, okay? And while the economic downturn certainly didn't help them, okay, that's not one of the main reasons. It's because none of these orgs were already in a place to where they could become sustainable without having to make cuts. Right now, they may have had a plan where it's like, hey, if things get really terrible, then yeah, we're going to cut a bunch of these things to be as bare bones as we can to make sure that we survive, right? That's what the sustainability part is. Okay, they are sustainable. They are able to pay their people with the amount of money that they are currently bringing in, or at least have on hand. Okay. Yes, the FTX deal, I think, did affect this, but more so in the expansion portions of it. Now, I think they are taking away from the LCS, but that is for a different reason that I'll go over here later. Our current team is stronger and more performant. I don't know that that's true. I think that that's just kind of words that he is trying to say to try to keep people's spirits up. They could be true. I don't know. I haven't talked to these people. I haven't talked to Reggie himself. I haven't seen it myself. But that feels like something that he is trying to say to encourage people that, hey, yes, we are making these cuts, right? We are doing it because we have to, but we're going to be stronger. We're going to be more performant, right? And to a certain degree, the teams that they do have, right, are doing that, right? The Apex team is really solid. The Dota team is really solid. I think, I forget which Smash player they've kept, but I'm pretty sure that he has been performing as well. The only team that hasn't been performing is the LCS team, and there are reasons behind that. But all the other teams, their Rainbow Six team that they cut, they were one of the best in the world, right? And it's comes from this mindset, I believe, that Reggie and Dominic shared. And yeah, I'll have to do a breakdown of that as well here in a minute. But we don't see negative effects with the changes that we've made. TSM was not headed in the right direction. I'm taking a more hands-on role. In fact, we've put the right decision makers in place to be more successful long term. Again, a lot to unpack with this statement. We don't see negative effects with the changes that we've made. To a certain degree, he is probably right. It's not going to get a whole lot worse with the changes that they have made, right? I don't think the LCS team is going to get much worse than they already are. I don't think all the other things that they have in place right now are going to get any worse. I think the negative effects have already happened. I don't think the changes that they've made right now are going to make a big difference. They're not going to get better, but they may not get worse. They're going to be kind of just flatline there for right now. Not flatline, but I don't know, consistent if we're talking about a heartbeat. TSM was not headed in the right direction. I'm taking on a more hands-on role. Listen, like Reggie, every time you've put your hands in there, it has either been very good or very bad, apparently, from everything that we've seen and heard. I am intrigued to see if this works, because now he is implicating himself to be, if this doesn't work, if all these changes and these things do not do what the desired result is for him or the fans, then it's a lot more on his head than it was before, right? Because he put people in place to make a lot of these decisions, to do a lot of these things. But now, with him being more hands-on, with him taking a more active role in it, the changes and the things that happen may not work. Now, Reggie is, I actually believe, a relatively, well, no, I might say relatively, I think he is a smart individual. He has made a lot of good decisions in the past that has put TSM in this position in the first place. Not the bad parts of it, but like leading up to COVID and everything, Reggie was pretty involved. Reggie did help build the brand of TSM, obviously. Now, it's not that when he stepped away, things got worse. I think there were other outside circumstances, but if he's more hands on, then that at least shows how much he still cares and wants to make things better, obviously, not just for himself, but for the org and potentially even, we'll see, esports as a whole. The last part is, in fact, we put the right decision makers in place to be more successful long term. Here's the reality, guys. We don't know who any of those decision makers are. He may just be literally stating himself and a couple of the people who are still there. We'll have to see. We'll talk about Chawi, I think, more in depth at a different point, but I mean, clearly they are giving the keys of the LCS over to Chawi at this point. I mean, he seemingly is able to handle it, but like without help, how is he going to react? I feel really bad for Chawi at this point, if I'm being honest with you. Like, I'm more focused on the LCS part. Like, he has been around for 3 splits, and he has had only like 1.5, 2 normal splits now. Like, I don't really know what to think with him, because that first split with the experimental players from China just didn't work out because he kind of got sabotaged. And then summer split, they had to make drastic changes. This last split, they made weird changes at the end. Now he's got no help at all, and I don't really know. I feel for him. I hope he can handle it all. Now, I will say this kind of harkens back to the old days where these coaches were all of these things, and I'm sure Reggie thinks that, hey, a good coach can handle all of these things, right? I've seen it happen. I was one of those people, right? I don't know if that's going to be the case, but if Chawi can handle it, like if this team can even get better, right? Let's say they go 10-8 instead of 8-10. That is like, we should be having very real discussions about coaching staff of the split, coach of the split for him, because if he can keep this team afloat, both in challengers and at the LCS level by himself, essentially, I'm sure there will be some help from somebody else, but generally it will be by himself, then good for him. And it may explain why we have a lot of veterans as well, by the way. They don't have to teach as much. They don't have to do as much. It makes it a little bit easier to plan and discuss things. So, maybe that's part of the reason why they decide to go with a veteran squad, because you don't have to show people like Hanser and Svenskeren and Wild Turtle and Maple really how to do a lot of things, even solo, right? Like, you more get to focus on just trying to create the best game plan you can with the players that you have. So, I don't know. Last parts here, they're basically pushing back the announcement for anything, for minimum of 4 to 5 months. That means we're probably not hearing about anything until the end of the year, at least until the LCS split is over, and TSM have been eliminated at some point. I doubt we're going to Worlds with this roster. So, if any of you players are watching, I hope that you guys can make it. I think I have a lot of respect and love for you, but based on what we saw in spring, if I'm being realistic, I don't see it happening. But, if it does, great. If not, then like that's why he's setting that timetable, right? That is July or excuse me. Yeah, it's somewhere around August or September, essentially. It's about when the LCS split ends. I'll make a post later on why we decided to invest less into the LCS this season. Guys, I think the reality is just the LCS isn't doing as well. He's going to claim that, they weren't getting their money back on it, so it made more sense economically for them to put less money into it right now, and I'm sure I would be surprised, but I would be impressed if he actually addressed the different, the situation that he is personally in because of the LCS, and, maybe would discuss the fact that, it would be great if he took some responsibility for it instead of just pushing it all onto the LCS and saying, I don't know, I guess the word would be petty about, they did all these things to me, so I wasn't going to invest more into it or whatever, I think there's a way he could go around that and talk about the fact that economically the LCS may just not make a lot of sense for them right now, especially when you see teams like 100 Thieves and Team Liquid that are pouring in millions of dollars into these players, and they're not even making it to the top 4, let alone, competing for an MSI or a Worlds title of any sort. So I'm sure that that's what it's going to be. I would be more shocked if that's not the way that he described it. He's going to probably talk about how much money he's poured into it and how little they've gotten in return. I get it. My overall impression of this is I get it. It is a smart decision for him to be sustainable, to keep the company alive so that when times are a little bit less lean, right, when either investments are coming back or just dollars in general in the world are more valuable, right, then maybe he will start to invest more. But for now, I respect the fact that he's got to get his company, TSM, the organization, into a place where it can survive so that when the opportunity comes for them to start thriving again and pushing forward, that they can do that, right? They are going to operate at, as minimal as they can. And for fans, guys, you got to get over the fact that, like, well, I don't like it. Like, get over it. Sustainability, surviving, being profitable, these are the ways that you can continue to watch TSM with your children, right? With your grandchildren, potentially, if esports continues to grow. Because it's still growing, it's just now at a much slower rate than before, right? You have to understand these things, and you have to be accepting of the fact that these are hard decisions that have to be made, but they are likely for the better overall. There were a lot of mistakes made, not just by Reggie, but by heads of people in esports all around the world leading up to this point. Right now, nobody could have predicted a pandemic and the economic fallout that would come from it. I think you could have more predicted the economic fallout a little bit, but not to this extent. It's been pretty rough out there. So I respect Reggie, at least in the sense that I think business-wise he is making a smart decision. And he is explaining that, hey, we shot for this, the Icarus thing. They flew too close to the sun, but instead of being like Icarus and flying into it and dying, right? They pulled back. They're being smart, and I think they are making a good business decision to keep TSM around. Now, what does this mean for the LCS future? I don't know. Are we going to be middle to mediocre for the rest of this year and probably maybe at least next year? I would say, yeah, that seems pretty likely to me. But whether, like, the philosophy of it, I think is something that needs to change. And I will talk about that at some point, because I think you can do very similar things but growing with this is like a perfect opportunity to get a lot of young players and get them opportunity, in my opinion at least, instead of investing into a bunch of veterans. But he also knows that LCS fans, TSM fans in particular, will not accept anything worse than what we just had, right? And that's where my last point here is going. Truthfully, this is from Master Wolf 713 on Reddit, on the TSM Reddit. Truthfully, we did better this split than most assumed. At the beginning of the split, I asked for people's hopes and expectations. I think for most people, our finish 7th with an 8-10 record, while disappointing, is also expected or better than expected. But I also think that we looked at times as if we could beat anybody and had a good shot to make playoffs. The deflation people felt from the bubble finish hit harder than it might if we just stunk from start to finish. I think this is a pretty good take, but here's what I will say is, at some point, like, we can't just be happy with a bunch of veterans that could make playoffs, right? I think, our expectations were exceeded. Mine were met. 8 wins. That's what I wanted. I think in normal years, I'll have to go back at some point and I'll look. I mean, we'll probably talk about it on the show at some point, but like 8 wins generally get you that 6th spot. We missed it by 1 game. If we beat 100 Thieves there, maybe we're 0-3ing out. I don't know. I mean, I just think that yes, they exceed our expectations. I think there were great plays. I think that Chawi did a pretty good job. I think the players really were able to lean on each other and find a way to win games that they probably shouldn't have. But, the reason why I pushed for the last few years to bring in young players to build up this team is because that's how you win championships. You don't win championships with every one of your players except for one being 25 years or older, because you see what happens to most players. Not every player. Doublelift is an exception to that, but he's also one of the best players of all time. Bjergsen, at least in the LCS, right? Potentially in the world, but at least in the LCS. Bjergsen, same way, right? Like, yeah, was he as outstanding as people would have liked? No, but he was super consistent, right? He was always there. He's still making the right plays. His brain is there, right? And somewhat his skills are there too. But like, I know 100 Thieves isn't a great example for most people, but the whole evil geniuses thing of 3 vets and 2 rookies, 2 real rookies, not Boogie rookie who's 24, and Chime rookie, who I love Chime. I think he's probably our most valuable piece right now, by a pretty large margin in my opinion. Who was still coming up a little bit late, but at 23 years old, right? Like, most of these other places are taking chances on young guys that they can build up, those guys can become the foundational pieces of their team moving forward, while also pairing them with veterans that can help pull them up and keep them focused and, allow them to do well during playoffs and everything else, because they have that mindset. They know what they need to do. I think you do that, and you continue to do that until you have a team of 5, similar to Evil Geniuses, that is pretty solid from top to bottom, right? And that's how you win in today's LCS. That's how you win championships. I am not okay with just making playoffs. I would rather us finish 3-15, but have a bunch of young guys who got experience, who we saw some things, who can make that next step, right? Now, I guess 3-13 is a bad example, because even a younger team, you'd like to get like 6 wins probably in their first split. But like, you get what I'm saying. Like, I would rather have a team that has potential to win an LCS championship and consistently win in the future than one that is going to consistently finish 5th, 6th, 7th, maybe on a great split 4th. And it just doesn't satisfy me, not just as a TSM fan, but in general. To me, there's no point to build a team to just be average. And right now, right, maybe not Master Wolf, but a lot of the comments I've seen on Reddit are people who are just okay with average. Well, at least we're not last. That ain't it for me, man. And I don't know if that's going to change anytime soon. I will try to dive into it a little bit more on Wednesday. This is already my longest episode, I believe, of the season. But if you can't tell, like, I do think that Reggie is making a good decision at the beginning. But you are leaving Chawi with nothing. And Reggie is not allowed to be involved. Right? He is on suspension right now from the LCS. He cannot be involved with the team. Right now, I'm sure they can sneak around and maybe, he can take a chance and try to be more involved, but he can't. So he can't personally help out Chawi and the LCS team at this point. So he's going to have to hire somebody, I would assume, to help. But I just don't know. I don't know that. I think Glenn was in a pretty good spot for the rest of the LCS and for, helping with Chawi. They seemed to, he was there every game. He was basically like another coach. I don't remember general managers in the past being at every LCS game and being at their practices and really being that involved. I am a little bit hesitant to dive much deeper than that, because I really do want to do a little bit more on Wednesday talking about the LCS philosophy, I think, based on what Regi has stated. But, I upvoted this, but like, it is a decline in standards. I think it's a necessary one to get them to where they need to be, but I think it's more on the fans, right? Like, you have got to, I have got to, we have all got to accept that there are going to be lean times. And instead of just yelling at TSM, right, understand the ecosystem of esports as a whole. And understand that, like, yeah, Team Liquid and 100 Thieves are doing it this split. I bet you changes are coming. At least next year. Maybe not in the summer, but at least next year. They're not going to pay people absurd amounts of money to finish, what was that, 5th, 6th, and 8th. Somewhere around there. Right? Like, we balled on a budget. We moneyballed the crap out of this. And I like that. I think that's smart. But, like, yeah, at some point got to moneyball more than just veterans for you to find success. And I hope that they do that. I really do. I think they will. I do, at least to end on a positive note. I do think that Chawi has done a lot. I think we saw a lot from this team. I think pieces like specifically Maple and Wild Turtle and Chime, I think are things that you can build around. Now I don't know that I would keep Wild Turtle. I think there are some really good young ADCs out there, but regardless, I think you have at least three pieces, and then you got to figure out your top side and jungle. You just have to. I think Boogie had good moments. I think he had great moments, but I think he had a lot of bad moments and a lot of moments too. So, um, you know, Hanser apparently said something about keeping the team mostly together. I wouldn't be surprised by that. I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if we ran Hanser, Svenskeren, Maple, Wild Turtle, and Chime next split. Wouldn't surprise me at all. And I think we would probably see a very similar result. 8, maybe 9 wins. Obviously, making playoffs with that team, I think, would be at least the minimum, considering 8 out of 10 teams make it. But things are changing. The winds are changing. And this is not entirely TSM's fault, to the extent of everybody else made the same mistakes that they did. And it seems like, at least, instead of folding and not existing anymore, TSM are fighting to make sure that they can continue to find sustainable success and maybe even profitability, at least getting into the black. That would be great. So, I don't know, guys. Let me know in the comment section below. I know I just rambled on a lot about a lot of different aspects, and there's so much more to dive into, but I figured this would be a good first Monday episode for us to dive into. So, yeah, just let me know what you think if you've made it to this point. And with that, I'll catch you guys on the next one.